I adjusted my shirt collar for the third time in the last 5 minutes. My hands were trembling slightly, not from excitement, but from irritation. 70 years later, I still had to play these family games, pretending that everything was fine when in reality she wanted to tell the truth to her face. Today is Tristan and Celeste's wedding anniversary. 5 years ago, I stood at St. Matthew's and watched my only son marry a woman who showed from day one that she didn't think our family was good enough for her. At the time, I remained silent. Martha squeezed my hand and whispered, "Give them a chance." I did. For 5 years, I did. And what did I get in return? I kept silent this morning when Tristan called to remind me about the party. His voice was strained, as if he wasn't particularly excited about the party. "Daddy, you're coming, aren't you?" Celeste had gone to a lot of trouble to organize everything, ordering the catering, decorating the house. Of course she did. Celeste is always trying to impress, especially when it comes to money, which she never has enough of, but which she spends like she's typing in her basement. Catering, jewelry, a new dress. It all costs money. Where are they coming from when Tristan complained to me a month ago that they can barely make ends meet? I pulled my best jacket out of the closet, a dark blue one I'd bought when I'd worked as a chief engineer on the construction site of a new shopping center on the outskirts of town. That was about 10 years ago, but the jacket still looked decent. Quality fabric, good tailor work. Not like the expensive rags Celeste wore, which apparently she bought on credit and then spent months paying off. In the mirror, a gray-haired man with tired brown eyes looked back at me. The wrinkles were deeper than I remembered. The skin on his hands had become drier, and his hair had turned gray. Since Martha's death 3 years ago, I'd aged about 10 years. My wife always had a knack for smoothing over sharp edges in the family. She'd find the right words when I was ready to snap. She'd still find a way to reconcile me and my sister-in-law. But Martha was gone, and I'd never learned to pretend everything was fine. I remember the day Tristan brought Celeste home for the first time. It was September. The leaves were just starting to turn yellow. She was 24. He was 28. A beautiful girl. You had to hand it to her. Long brown hair, chiseled figure, knows how to dress. She came in a white blouse and pencil skirt. Heeled shoes. She looked like a magazine model. But even then, I noticed how she was looking around the house. Not admiring, not interested, but evaluating. It was like she was evaluating whether or not she wanted to be with a guy from that family. She had a cold, calculating gaze. She looked at our old sofa, at the worn carpet in the hallway, at the pictures on the walls, counting, evaluating, drawing conclusions. "What a cozy house," she said to Martha, and there was no warmth in her voice. "It must be very practical." Martha smiled and offered tea, and I realized that the word practical meant cheap and simple in Celeste's mouth. Our house was ordinary, really, a two-story house, built in the 70s, no frills or design frills. But it was ours, bought with honestly earned money, without loans and debts. Every nail, every board, I'd picked out myself when Martha and I first got married. Tristan was head over heels in love. He looked at Celeste as the eighth wonder of the world. Celeste played the part of the demure girl who was just happy to be with such a wonderful man. She lowered her eyes when Tristan praised her, smiled shyly when we asked questions about her work and plans. She worked then as an assistant designer in a small firm called Creative Solutions and complained constantly about the small salary. She told us that she dreamed of opening her own studio, but didn't have enough money yet. Tristan, my good silly son, started paying her bills before the wedding. First dinners at restaurants, then clothes, then refresher courses. I tried to talk to him then. I picked a moment when we were alone in the yard, fixing the fence. "Son, are you sure you know Celeste well? Aren't things moving too fast for you?" Tristan put the hammer down and looked at me with that stubborn expression I remembered from his childhood. "Dad, I love her. Isn't that enough? We understand each other. We have plans in common. Love." When I was his age, I thought love solved everything. Then I realized it's more about compatibility, shared values, compromise. Celeste had a problem with compromise from the start, or rather she thought that only other people should compromise, and she had the right to demand what she wanted. I remember when she was picking out her wedding dress. Martha suggested they go together. She thought it would bring them closer together. Celeste agreed, but in the store she acted like a capricious princess. The first dress wasn't lush enough, the second was the wrong shade of white, the third didn't fit properly at the waist. Martha waited patiently while her sister-in-law tried on half the store. "This is the day of my life," Celeste explained. "Everything has to be perfect." The day of her life had cost an insane amount of money. Celeste insisted on the Riviera, the most expensive restaurant in town. She ordered a dress from a designer in Denver. She invited a professional photographer, a florist, even musicians. Tristan went into debt, but never said a word. And Celeste spent 6 months showing everyone the pictures and telling them what a gorgeous wedding they'd had. Over those 5 years, I watched her slowly change my son. Tristan started dressing differently. Now he only buys brand-name shirts and expensive jeans. Speaking differently, there are words in his speech that weren't there before. Going on vacations where his wife wants to go. Last year they flew to California, although Tristan has always dreamed of fishing in Colorado. He works as a programmer for a company called Techno Solutions, and the salary is not bad for our town, but it's not cosmic. $3,500 a month, except for bonuses, and Celeste spends like he owns this company and several others. I tied my tie, dark red, a last birthday present from Martha, and looked at the clock. It's 6:45. The party starts at 7 sharp, but Celeste probably expects everyone to arrive 1 minute to the minute. She doesn't like tardiness, especially when it comes to events she organizes. Punctuality is a sign of respect, she likes to say. The car keys were on the dresser next to Martha's picture. My wife was smiling from the portrait. This photo was taken the year before she died when we traveled to Niagara Falls. For a second, I thought she was shaking her head. "Don't get into arguments," it was as if she was saying. Martha had always been a peacemaker. Perhaps that's why Celeste never openly confronted her. In front of her mother-in-law, her daughter-in-law behaved in an exemplary manner, and all her grievances were expressed through hints and disgruntled glances. Tristan's house was in the new Willow Park neighborhood, where each house cost as much as 3 of mine. Celeste had insisted on buying here, even though a 30-year mortgage was eating up half the family budget. "We need a prestigious address," she explained. What exactly she needed it for, she never said. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw several cars already in the driveway. The neighbor's Honda, the Ford of Tristan's colleague, an unfamiliar gray Chevy. The guests were arriving on time. The house was lit up with windows, porch lights on the porch, garlands strung in the yard. Celeste had really made an effort to impress. She met me at the door before I could even ring the bell. She was wearing a new dress, black, sequined, obviously expensive. I knew it was new because she wasn't wearing anything I'd seen at family dinners before. "Jean, it's so good of you to come." She kissed me on the cheek, but there was a strain in her voice. "Come in. Everyone's here. It's such a special day." There was too much joy in her voice, too much enthusiasm, like an actress overplaying her part. There were 15 people in the living room. Tristan's colleagues, neighbors, a few of Celeste's friends from her former job at the design firm. The music was playing softly, some kind of modern jazz that Celeste considers sophisticated. There were elegant plates of appetizers and several bottles of champagne on the table. Everything looked classy and expensive, like a picture from a magazine about the beautiful life. Tristan approached me with a glass in his hand. He was wearing a new shirt, a white one with cufflinks that I'd seen for the first time. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes. "Dad, thanks for coming. How you doing? How you feeling?" "I'm fine. Happy anniversary." We hugged and I could feel how tense he was. His shoulders were wooden, his movements stiff. Something was wrong, but I didn't ask in front of the guests. Celeste was already circling the room with a glass in her hand, telling someone about vacation plans in Europe. "We're thinking of going to Italy this summer," she told her neighbor, Deborah Hampton. "Sure, Tuscany, such vineyards, such architecture. Tristan has long dreamed of seeing Florence. It's interesting. I remember Tristan complaining as recently as last month that he could barely cover his household expenses. Europe costs money, a lot of money. Tickets, hotels, excursions, all $5,000 minimum. Where would they get it from?" Celeste caught my eye and came toward me. She always walked like a model, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, measured steps. She looked even more spectacular in her new dress. Gina, have some champagne. It's a celebration today." She handed me a glass filled with sparkling wine. "By the way, you look great. That jacket really suits you. Vintage is in fashion now, you know. Vintage." She so elegantly made it clear to everyone here that my jacket was old. It was a classic Celeste move. Humiliate, but make it sound like a compliment. "Thank you," I said dryly. The jacket was not new, but its quality. Of course," Celeste smiled her sweet smile. "In your generation, you had an appreciation for quality. They bought things to last for years. Not like us. We always want something new." Tristan's colleague, Kevin Sterling, a 35-year-old programmer, was standing next to us. He listened attentively to our conversation. "How long have you been retired, Mr. Blackstone?" Kevin asked. 3 years, I answered. "I worked as a civil engineer." "Oh, an engineer!" Celeste shook her hands. "Jean built shopping centers, office buildings. But that was back in the days when engineers earned a decent salary. Now, of course, pensions aren't as generous as they used to be. Another neat trick. Now everyone knows I'm in financial trouble. It's not true, though. My pension is quite sufficient for a modest but decent life. The house has long been paid off. The car's not new but serviceable. There is enough money for food and medicine. I am not rich, but I am not poor." "But what an experience!" Kevin picked up on that. "You must have had some interesting projects." "There have been," I nodded. "The downtown library, for example. The sports complex on Main Street." "Oh yeah, the sports complex." Celeste shook her head. "Tristan had told me about it. It was a beautiful building. Too bad they tore it down 5 years ago. They said the foundation had cracked. That was a lie. The complex was demolished not because of defects, but because the city had decided to build a shopping center on the site. But Celeste made it sound like I wasn't doing my job properly. I felt my irritation rising, but I held it back. Martha always said, "Don't stoop to the level of provocateur." Celeste was obviously trying to piss me off. I don't know why. "The foundation was fine," I said flatly. "The building was demolished for commercial reasons." "Of course, I'm not an expert," Celeste said. "I could have gotten it wrong. I don't have a technical head." Deborah Hampton, who had been listening to our conversation, decided to change the subject. "Celeste, what beautiful earrings you have. They're so unusual." Celeste touched her earlobe. She was wearing simple gold carnations, nothing special. "Oh, they're old. Tristan gave them to her before they were married. And the diamond ones you wore last week? Remember when we met at the supermarket?" Celeste's face tensed for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Oh, yeah, those. They're at the jeweler's getting cleaned. You know, diamonds require special care." "Interesting. Diamond earrings being cleaned. I know a jeweler, Albert Crane. We've been friends since college. He once told me that jewelry cleaning takes a few days at most, not weeks." Kevin asked Tristan about the job, and the conversation drifted away. I stepped back to the window watching the guests. Celeste fluttered from group to group, the soul of the company everywhere, telling jokes, inquiring about business, giving compliments, the perfect hostess. But I noticed that the conversation kept coming back to money. Then she complains about the costliness of repairs in the bathroom, then admires the new car of the neighbors and hints that they too, it would be time to update the car. Then she talks about the expensive restaurant where they recently had dinner. "Imagine the bill for $300, she said to a middle-aged couple. "But what an atmosphere. What a serving of food. Sometimes you have to pamper yourself, don't you? $300 for dinner. At their income, that's insane. I did the math. That's almost a tenth of Tristan's monthly salary. Normal people spend that kind of money on a week's worth of groceries, not one dinner." "Jean, where do you usually eat dinner?" Celeste turned to me, noticing my gaze. "Do you have any favorite places in the city?" "At home, usually," I answered. "I cook myself." "Oh, how practical," Celeste laughed. "It must be economical. Food is so expensive now, especially quality food. We try to buy everything organic, but it's so hard on the budget. Again with the economy. Another allusion to my poverty. She insists on painting me the image of a poor old man who skimped on food, even though she's complaining about not having enough money. "It's healthier to cook at home," I said. "You know what you're eating." Of course," Celeste nodded. "But sometimes you want to relax, to enjoy yourself. Life is short, so why limit yourself? Life is short is a favorite phrase of people who spend more than they earn. I've heard it from many of my colleagues who then spent decades paying off loans. Tristan approached us with our new guests, a couple in their 30s. The man introduced himself as Brandon, a programmer from a neighboring firm. The woman was Hazel, who worked at the bank. "And this is my father," Tristan said, "Jean Blackstone." We said hello. Hazel turned out to be a pleasant woman, without pretensions and arrogance. Shonolam. "Programming is an interesting job," she told Tristan. "It must pay well, right?" Tristan was embarrassed, but Celeste immediately joined the conversation. "No way. Programmers in our little town make pennies compared to the big cities. In Denver or Seattle, yeah, you can make money there. But here," she sighed sadly, "you have to work your ass off, find extra projects. Extra projects. As far as I know, Tristan only works for one company, and he doesn't have any part-time jobs. Where's the money for restaurants and vacations and new clothes?" "It's quieter here, though," Hazel said. "In big cities, there is such a bustle." "Yes, it's quiet," Celeste agreed. "Sometimes it's too quiet. It's a bit boring for young people here. There's not much entertainment, no cultural life. Right, John? It's just right for you. You don't have to hurry anywhere. You can stay at home." Another injection. Now I'm not just poor, but an inactive old man who wants nothing from life. Celeste methodically constructs my image in front of the guests. Why would she do that? I looked at my son. Tristan was avoiding my gaze, talking to Brandon about some technical matter. But it was obvious that he could hear every word his wife said and felt uncomfortable. The irritation was growing by the minute. Celeste was a master of subtle mockery. Every phrase she said was polite, even caring, but the point was the same: to show that I was a loser living on welfare who didn't belong in their circle of successful young men. The party had been going on for over an hour. The guests had relaxed, the conversations louder, the laughter more raucous. Celeste was pouring champagne, making sure that there were always fresh appetizers on the table, accepting compliments for the excellent organization of the party. She was in her element, the center of attention, the perfect hostess, a woman who knows how to create an atmosphere. I stood by the bookcase looking at the spines. Most of the books had clearly been bought for beauty. Collections of classics in expensive bindings, art albums, travel guides to countries Celeste had never been to. There weren't many real books to read. "Jean, do you read a lot?" Deborah Hampton approached me with a glass in her hand. "You must have a library at home." "I do," I nodded. "Mostly technical books, history." "How interesting. And fiction." "Yeah, I read fiction too. Hemingway, Steinbeck." Celeste heard our conversation and joined us. She had an almost empty glass in her hand, her cheeks slightly flushed from the champagne. "What are you two talking about? About books?" She took one of the art albums from the shelf. "Jean, look at this beautiful album about the Louvre. Tristan and I dream of going there, to see the Gioconda with our own eyes." The album was really expensive. Glossy paper, high-quality printing, gold embossing on the cover. It costs at least $100. "It's a beautiful album," I agreed. "Yes, I chose it very carefully." Celeste flipped through the pages. "I wanted something really worthwhile. I don't like cheap knockoffs. I'd rather save up and buy a quality item than junk." Again, the hint of my financial capabilities. Celeste couldn't just show the book. It was mandatory to mention that she only buys expensive things, unlike some people. Kevin Sterling and his wife, a skinny blonde named Amy, approached us. They were newly married. You could tell by the way they held hands and looked at each other. "Celeste, your house is so beautiful," Amy marveled. "And the jewelry is exquisite, especially those earrings you wore at the company party last month." "Diamonds?" Celeste's face twitched, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Oh yeah, those earrings. Thank you for the compliment. Where did you buy them?" "I'm looking for something similar for my sister. Her birthday's coming up." Celeste sipped from her glass, clearly buying time. It was a gift from Tristan. He picked it out himself. I don't even know exactly where he bought it." Can I see it?" Amy tilted her head. "Why didn't you wear them today? They look so good on you." "They," Celeste stammered, then straightened up sharply. "They're gone." There was a pause in the conversation. Amy opened her mouth in surprise. Kevin frowned. Deborah set her glass on the table. Missing how? Deborah asked. Celeste looked around, making sure all the guests were listening to her. Her voice grew louder, dramatic. They disappeared from my jewelry box 3 weeks ago. $3,000 earrings. Real diamonds, the work of a jeweler in Denver. The guests looked at each other. Someone put down a glass. The music suddenly seemed too loud. Did you go to the police? Kevin asked. No, I haven't. Celeste shook her head. You see, this is a family matter. I know exactly who took them. Tristan, who was talking to Brandon at the other end of the room, heard the last words and turned to us. Celeste, what are you talking about? Your earrings, honey, the ones you gave me for my 3rd anniversary. Do you remember how happy I was? Of course I do, but they were stolen right out of our house. Celeste was getting louder and louder. Can you believe it? Someone came into our bedroom and took them out of the jewelry box. All the guests gathered around us. The atmosphere of celebration evaporated and tension hung in its place. Who could have done it? Hazel asked. You don't have strangers in the house. Celeste turned to me slowly. Her eyes were shining, her cheeks burning. She was clearly enjoying the moment. There are no intruders, but there are people we considered family. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. People we trusted. Who came to our house, knew where the valuables were. Tristan turned pale. Celeste, what are you trying to say? I want to tell the truth. Celeste raised her hand sharply and pointed her finger at me. That old man is a thief. He stole my earrings when he came to dinner a month ago. There was dead silence in the room. Everyone looked at Celeste and me. Someone groaned softly, someone took a step back. I felt a chill run through my body. Not shame or fear, but rage. 70 years of honest living, and this is the accusation I'm facing in front of strangers. Celeste, have you gone mad? Tristan whispered. No, darling, I have finally had an epiphany. Celeste turned to the guests. You understand, pensions are miserable now, and you want to live decently. So he decided to improve his financial situation at our expense. Deborah Hampton coughed awkwardly. Kevin stared at the floor. Amy huddled close to her husband. Everyone felt extremely uncomfortable, but no one knew what to say. I looked at my son. Tristan stood there with his mouth open, unable to utter a word. His eyes were filled with confusion and horror. And then something in me snapped. All the humiliation of the evening, all the innuendo, all the attempts to make me look like a penniless loser, it all came down to one clear desire, to put that liar in her place. You know, Celeste, I said calmly, you're right about one thing. The earrings are really gone from your jewelry box. Celeste nodded triumphantly. You see, he confesses. But you forgot to add, I continued in the same even tone, that the earrings disappeared because you took them out yourself, to the Golden Horseshoe Pawn Shop on Oak Street, on the 27th of last month, got $2,200 for them. Celeste's face changed instantly. The blush was gone from her cheeks, her eyes widened with shock. What did you say? You sold the earrings to pay off the minimum payment on your MasterCard credit card, I said clearly, so that every guest could hear every word. The debt had accumulated because of your shopping and eating out. Celeste tried to smile, but it was pathetic. That's bullshit. How could you possibly know that? Because the pawn shop clerk, Rosa Miller, is my neighbor. She told me how a beautiful young woman brought in some expensive earrings and was very nervous at the checkout. Rosa remembered you because you cried when you handed over the jewelry. The glass fell out of Celeste's hands and shattered on the floor. The champagne spilled over the carpet, shards flying in different directions. But no one paid any attention to it. Everyone was staring at my son's daughter-in-law, who had just choked on her own lies. The shards of the glass lay on the carpet like shattered hopes. Celeste stood among them, pale and confused, and all the guests looked at her with undisguised curiosity. The festive atmosphere had finally evaporated, giving way to a heavy tension. It's not true, Celeste shook her head, trying to pull herself together. This is some kind of monstrous mistake. I've never been in that pawn shop. Her voice was shaking, but she was still trying to play the part of the aggrieved victim. Her hands were shaking as she bent down to pick up the shards. Leave it, Tristan said quietly. I'll clean it up later. He looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. The eyes were filled with confusion and the beginning realization that something serious was happening, something that could change everything. Rose remembered you very well, I continued calmly. Sana, you were wearing a gray coat and black-heeled boots. Your hair was in a ponytail. First you asked how much you got for the earrings. Then you hesitated for a long time. Rosa even offered you coffee while you were deciding. No, Celeste whispered. It's just a coincidence. A lot of women wear gray coats. You also brought a sapphire ring, I added. But you didn't pawn it. She said it was a memento of her grandmother. Celeste's face darkened completely. The sapphire ring was indeed a family heirloom, and only the people closest to her knew about it. Now it was clear that I was telling the truth. Kevin Sterling coughed awkwardly. Maybe we should leave. This is a family matter. No, stay, Tristan said sharply. I want to get to the bottom of this. Right now, he turned to his wife. There was a metallic note in his voice that I hadn't heard in years. It's what Tristan used to say when he was a kid, when he was angry or hurt. Celeste, is it true? Did you sell the earrings? Tristan, honey. Celeste tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. You don't believe these stories, do you? I'm asking you straight out. Were you at the pawn shop on the 27th of last month? Celeste was silent, thinking feverishly. It was obvious that she was trying to think of a plausible version of events, but time was working against her. The longer she remained silent, the guiltier she looked. Answer me, Tristan raised his voice. Yeah? Celeste looked around for support, but the guests averted their eyes. It's not what you think it is. What is it? Tristan took a step toward her. Explain to me what it is. Rose Miller could have made a mistake, I interjected. But there are records. A pawn shop must keep a record of all transactions. There are the date, time, description of the object, passport data of the client. Celeste turned to me sharply. Did you do this on purpose? Were you following me? I was just talking to my neighbor. Rosa told the story as a curiosity. Say, a young woman came in, very worried about having to part with jewelry. Rosa even felt sorry for you. And you immediately thought of me. Celeste flared up. You thought it was me. I didn't realize it right away, I admitted. Not until you started accusing me of stealing today. Then it all made sense. Deborah Hampton picked up her purse. We should probably get going. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, we should get going too, Kevin seconded. No, wait, Tristan held up his hand. Celeste, I want an explanation. Now. Celeste looked around at the guests, who clearly wanted to leave but were hesitant to interrupt the family drama. Her lips smiled thinly, not with joy but with despair. Good. Yes, I was at the pawn shop. A barely audible sigh passed through the room. Tristan closed his eyes as if he'd gotten a punch. Why? He asked quietly. I needed money. It was urgent. For what? We have a joint account, a credit card. Credit card, Celeste blurted out. I had to make a payment or the bank would have blocked it. What payment? Tristan frowned. We have an automatic debit for the minimum payment. The minimum wasn't enough. The debt became too much. What debt? Tristan's voice trailed off. I thought there was a maximum of $500 left on the card. Celeste remained silent, looking at the floor. How much? Tristan asked again. $8,400, Celeste whispered. Tristan staggered as if he'd been hit. Hazel gave an involuntary gasp. Even I, who had expected something like this, was amazed at the size of the debt. 8,000? Tristan repeated. How was that possible? It was accumulating gradually. Clothes, cosmetics, restaurants. Restaurants? What restaurants? We go there once a month. Not just together, Celeste raised her head, a challenge in her eyes. I go out with my girlfriends sometimes. Do I have a right to privacy? An $8,000 personal life? It's not just restaurants, design courses, clothes for work, makeup. You haven't worked in 3 years, and Tristan exploded. What do you need clothes for work? The guests stood like statues, afraid to move. The family scandal was unfolding in front of their eyes, but they could not leave, for they had unwittingly witnessed the collapse of their marriage. I was looking for a job, Celeste defended herself. I had to look good for the interviews. You've been to 2 job interviews in 3 years. Tristan spoke louder and louder. 2 interviews for $8,000. You don't know what it's like to sit at home with no money. Celeste raised her voice too. I'm used to a certain standard of living. What standard of living? We're living on one paycheck. Exactly, on your miserable salary as a backwoods programmer. The words sounded like a slap in the face. Tristan turned pale and then slowly blushed. My miserable salary pays for this house. Your food, your clothes, he said quietly but clearly. My miserable paycheck has allowed you to go 3 years without working. What do I have to thank you for that? Celeste shook her hands. Living like a beggar, denying myself everything? You didn't deny yourself anything. Tristan pounded his fist on the table. 8,000 in debt is proof of that. I watched this scene with a heavy feeling. On the one hand, Celeste was getting what she deserved. On the other hand, my son's marriage was being destroyed. Though perhaps this marriage was doomed from the beginning. Brandon quietly said something in his wife's ear, and they headed for the exit. The other guests began to pack up as well. Don't leave because of us, Tristan said bitterly. The feast is over. I apologize for that performance. It's okay, Kevin muttered. We understand. The guests began to say their goodbyes and leave. Some said, thank you for the evening. Others just nodded. Deborah Hampton squeezed Tristan's hand in farewell. Buenas, if you need anything, call me, she said. 10 minutes later, it was just the 3 of us in the house. Celeste was sitting on the couch staring at the floor. Tristan stood in the middle of the room amidst the shards of a broken glass. I stayed by the bookcase, not knowing if I should leave either. Dad, Tristan said without turning around, how did you know about the sapphire ring? Rose described it to you in great detail, I answered. She's an artist at heart, a detail-oriented person. So you've known for a long time? I assumed it, but I wasn't sure until today. Tristan turned to me slowly. Why didn't you tell me before? Because it's your family life, none of my business. But today you decided what had become your business? I looked at him carefully. There was no accusation in my son's voice, only weariness and pain. Today I was publicly accused of stealing, I said. It was already about me. A heavy silence hung in the living room. The sound of cars driving away came from the street as the guests hurried out of the house, where the family party had turned into a public exposure. Celeste was still sitting on the couch, hands clenched into fists. Tristan stood in the middle of the room, looking at his wife as if trying to figure out who she really was. I walked to the window and watched the last car, Brandon's gray Chevy, disappear around the corner. Tomorrow the whole town would be discussing what happened tonight. Celeste wouldn't survive that. She valued her reputation too much. $8,400, Tristan repeated, as if trying to comprehend the figure. That's more than 2 of my paychecks. Celeste looked up. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. Instead of remorse, she looked stubborn and angry. So what now? Are you going to lecture me about frugality? I want to understand how it happened, when it started, why you didn't tell me. I would have told you, so what? Would you have made a scene, forbidden me to spend money, put me on bread and water? Tristan shook his head slowly. I would have helped you find a way out. We'd work out the debts together. What kind of a way out? Celeste stood up from the couch, and I could see that she was swaying slightly. She'd had more champagne than she realized. Cut back on spending? Give up everything that makes life normal? Normal, Tristan interjected. Celeste, do you think it's normal to spend $8,000 in debt? I think it's normal to live like a human being, not a beggar, going to restaurants, buying nice clothes, going out with my girlfriends. On me, on my family. Celeste slammed her fist on the back of the couch. I'm a wife, not a servant. I'm entitled to money. I stood at the window and watched the argument. Celeste didn't understand the main thing. Money should be earned first and then spent. For her, the family budget was an unlimited source of money for her desires. All right, Tristan said tiredly. Hakeform, tell me in detail, what exactly you spent the $8,000 on? Why do you want to know? Because I want to know the truth. The whole truth. Celeste walked across the room, stepping around the shards of the broken glass. Her movements were sharp, nervous. Clothes. 4,000 or so. 4,000 for clothes. Tristan opened his mouth. In how many months? A year. Maybe a little more. You spent a third of my paycheck on clothes every month? Not every month. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Celeste, your closet is full of clothes. There's enough clothes for a whole store. Old clothes, Celeste said. Fashions change. You can't wear the same thing for years. I thought back to my closet. I'd bought most of them 5 or 10 years ago, and they still looked decent. But I understood, for Celeste, clothes weren't just a necessity, but a way of asserting herself. What else? Tristan asked. Makeup, a hairdresser, $1,000. A year? Yes. Treatments are expensive. Good cosmetics cost money. $2,000 for restaurants? Roughly. We went out together too. We went out once a month. To cheap places. Not just together. I went out with Lauren, with Emily. Tristan walked across the room, trying not to step on the shards. So you took your friends to expensive restaurants on my dime, and you told me you didn't have enough money in the family? That's not true. I didn't take them out on purpose. What was it like? Celeste was silent, realizing that she had backed herself into a corner. Answer me, Tristan insisted. What was it like? Sometimes they'd ask me to go out, and I didn't have any cash. I had to pay with a card. Who? So you couldn't tell your friends that we were having money problems? No, Celeste burst into flames. I couldn't look like a beggar. That was the root of the problem. Celeste was not afraid of being poor, but of other people finding out about their financial difficulties. She cared more about the opinion of outsiders than the family's well-being. And the other 1,500? Tristan continued his questioning. Stuff, gifts, cabs, small purchases. What kind of gifts? Birthdays, holidays? You can't just show up empty-handed. Celeste, we gave gifts. I remember buying them together. Not always. Sometimes you were busy at work and I had to buy something right away. Tristan stopped and looked at his wife carefully. Show me the credit card statement. What? The credit card statement. I want to see exactly what the money was spent on. Celeste's face turned pale. Why would you do that? I told you. You said a lot of things, and now I want to see the documents. I don't have any on me. There's a wallet in your purse and a card in your wallet. We can go to the bank's website right now. Celeste backed up against the wall. This is humiliating. You don't trust me. After what happened today? No, I don't. Tristan pulled out his cell phone. Give me the map. I won't. Then I'll go to the bank myself tomorrow. As a co-borrower on the card, I'm entitled to full information. Celeste realized she'd lost. Slowly, she opened her purse, took out her wallet, pulled out a plastic card. Here you go. She tossed the card on the floor. Study it, analyze it, make every dollar count. Tristan picked up the card, turned on his phone, logged onto the bank's website. He flipped through the screen in silence for several minutes, his face growing grimmer and grimmer. Relax Spay, $250, he read aloud. Elite Fashion Store, $400. The Grand Palace Restaurant, $180. All that in one day. There was a special occasion. What special occasion? March 5th. What special occasion? Lauren's birthday. And the next day, shoe store, $300. I needed shoes to go with my dress. And the day after that, jewelry store, $500. Celeste didn't say anything. What did you buy at the jewelry store? Tristan asked quietly. A bracelet. What bracelet? Where is it? Ooh, I have it. Let me see it. Celeste reluctantly rolled up her sleeve. A thin gold bracelet with small stones glistened on her wrist. $500 for that? Tristan shook his head. Celeste, it's costume jewelry. It's not costume jewelry. It's gold with fianites. You can buy a bracelet with real diamonds for $500. How do you know that? You never knew anything about jewelry. As I listened to this conversation, I realized Celeste had been scammed at the store. They sold her a cheap piece of jewelry for the price of jewelry. But she didn't want to admit she'd been conned. Tristan continued to study the statement. Online cosmetics store, $300. A handbag store, 450. Riviera restaurant, 240. Enough, Celeste shouted. Stop embarrassing me. I'm not embarrassing you. You're the one who's dishonoring yourself, Celeste cried. Finally, tears ran down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. You don't understand. All my friends are better off than us. Their husbands earn more. I'm ashamed to be around them. And for that, you went into debt for $8,000? I wanted to look decent. I wanted you to be proud of me. Proud? Tristan laughed bitterly. No, Celeste, I'd be proud if you got a job. If you helped the family budget instead of ruining it. Easy for you to say. Who's going to run the household? What housekeeping? We order ready meals half the time. The cleaning lady comes twice a week. What kind of housekeeping do you do? Celeste sobbed and sank back onto the couch. Her black mascara left traces on her cheeks. Her expensive dress was wrinkled. She no longer looked like a successful young woman, more like a delinquent child. What's going to happen now? She asked quietly. I don't know, Tristan answered. I honestly don't know. I knew it was time for me to leave, but I couldn't bring myself to leave the house at a time like this. Tristan looked confused and depressed, and Celeste was sobbing on the couch, smearing mascara on her cheeks. The atmosphere was so heavy that the air seemed to grow thick. Dad, can you stay? Tristan asked without turning around. I need someone by my side. I nodded, though I realized my presence could only make things worse. Celeste was already furious that I was the one who'd ruined her play. But my son had asked, and after everything that had happened, I couldn't refuse him. Tristan continued to study the statement on his phone. His face grew more somber with each new line. Celeste, what's this payment for $1,500? Credit Solutions? Celeste lifted her crying head. It's no big deal. $1,500 is nothing special. What kind of company? A microcredit organization. Tristan froze. What? Well, when my credit card was maxed out and I needed money fast, I took out a small loan. A loan? Tristan's voice broke. Celeste, you took out a loan from a microfinance organization? It was temporary. I was going to pay it back quickly. At what interest rate? Celeste was silent, staring at the floor. What interest? Tristan repeated louder. 28% a year. 28%? Tristan clutched his head. No, that's usury. Do you realize what you've done? It was a last resort. How much did you take originally? 1,000. And you paid back, what, 500? So the interest is already accrued? Celeste nodded without raising her head. I watched the scene with growing horror. Microloans are a noose around the neck for people who don't know how to manage their money. The interest on these loans snowballs and it becomes almost impossible to get out of debt. Are there any other loans? Tristan asked tiredly. One. Small. How much? $500. Same company? No, a different one. Fast money. Tristan slumped heavily in his chair. He looked like he'd been kicked in the butt several times in a row. So $8,400 on a credit card. $150,000 on one loan. How much is the second loan with interest? $700, I guess. I guess. You don't know for sure? I know, $720. That's over $10,000 in debt. That's 4 months of my paycheck before taxes. Celeste sobbed. I didn't mean, it just kind of happened on its own. On its own? Tristan stood up and started pacing the room. You deliberately spent money we don't have. You knowingly hid debts. You knowingly took out loans at crazy interest rates. Don't yell at me. Celeste jumped up from the couch. My blood pressure could spike from stress. You're stressed? I'm what? I have to pay for your shopping sprees for years. We owe each other. We're family. Family? Tristan stopped and looked at her in surprise. You think a family is when one person spends and the other pays? I don't just spend. I take care of the house. The household. What household? Tristan exploded. The last time you cooked was a week ago. The machine does the laundry. The cleaning lady comes twice a week. What exactly do you do around the house? Celeste opened her mouth but couldn't answer. Do you know what I do? Tristan continued. Nah, sure. I work 10 hours a day. Programming, debugging, fixing other people's mistakes. I put up with the whims of my clients and the nagging of my bosses. All so you can spend money on restaurants and jewelry. You work because a man has to provide for his family. And a woman is supposed to do what? Spend whatever a man earns. A woman should be beautiful and happy. At someone else's expense? Celeste cried even harder. But through her tears, her voice was filled with anger and resentment. You don't understand me. No one understands me. She turned sharply to me. What are you doing here? Enjoying our problems? Dad asked me to stay, Tristan said. Of course he did. Now it's just the two of you against me. Celeste wiped away her tears, but her mascara was still smeared. It's all your fault. She pointed her finger in my direction. My fault? I was surprised. Yes, yours. If you'd helped us financially, I wouldn't have to go into debt. Tristan looked at his wife dumbfounded. Celeste, what does Dad have to do with this? He has a house, he has a pension, he has savings, and his son is living in debt. My father doesn't owe anybody anything. Yes, he does. He owes his son. Normal parents help their children. I felt rage boiling up in my chest. So I'm also to blame for their problems. Me, who had worked my whole life honestly and owed no one anything? Celeste, I said slowly, I helped Tristan buy this house. I put a down payment of $20,000. So what? That's a drop in the bucket. You have a house that's worth over $100,000. I built that house with my own hands. I paid for it for 40 years. So what now? You're gonna live in it till you die and let your son suffer? Tristan grabbed his wife by the shoulders. Enough! Papa's already helped us. He doesn't have to solve the problems you created. He's a rich pensioner. He could have helped us more. A rich pensioner? I couldn't help myself. Celeste, my pension is $100 a month. That's less than you spend on clothes. But you have no expenses. You live alone. You don't support anybody. I've got utilities, property taxes, insurance, medicine. And we have loans, mortgages, which you took out on your own, of your own free will. Celeste turned to Tristan. Do you hear me? Your father thinks we're to blame for our own problems. We are to blame, Tristan shouted. Or rather, it's your fault. I work and earn money and you waste it. I'm not wasting it. I'm living a normal life. A normal life. $10,000 in debt is normal? For a young family, yes. Everyone we know is living on credit. Hannah, and that's why we have to? Celeste suddenly stopped crying and straightened up. A cold glint appeared in her eyes. You know what? I'm sick of making excuses. Yes, I spend money. Yes, I take out loans. And you know why? Because I'm not going to live like a pauper. You're not a beggar. You're a beggar. On a programmer's salary from a backwater town, you can only exist. And I want to live. At my expense. At my family's expense. We are husband and wife. Husband and wife is a partnership. What we have here is a parasite. The word parasite sounded like a whiplash. Celeste turned pale, then red. How dare you call me that? What else do you call a person who only spends and gives nothing in return? I am a giver. I'm a wife. I create coziness, atmosphere. For $10,000 of atmosphere? Celeste looked around, looking for something to say in her defense. She looked at the expensive curtains, the stylish lamps, the framed pictures. Look how beautifully I've furnished the house. How stylish everything looks. With my money, our money, I'm your wife. A wife who lies and hides debts. I didn't want to upset you. I didn't want to upset you, but I wanted me to pay, Celeste cried again. But now the tears seemed less sincere. She realized that she had lost the argument and was trying to evoke pity. Tristan, honey, I'll make it up to you. I'll get a job. I'll save money. How will you get a job? You have no experience, no connections. I'll find one. I'll work anywhere. Anywhere? Tristan grinned bitterly. You're a princess. Working in a supermarket or a cafe is not for you. I'll do anything. Yesterday you were ready to spend $300 on dinner, and today you're ready for anything? Celeste didn't answer. She realized that every word she said would only make things worse. But she couldn't stay silent either. That would mean admitting defeat. All right, she said at last. If you want a divorce, get a divorce. Just remember, half of everything we have is legally mine. Half of the debts belong to you, too, Tristan said coldly. The court will decide who is to blame for the divorce. The court? Tristan looked at her in surprise. Are you already thinking about the trial? What else is there to think about? You're humiliating me, insulting me. I'm telling the truth. Your truth. And my truth is that I live with you for 5 years, and I have the right to compensation. As I listened to those words, I realized that my son's marriage was really over. Celeste is already planning a divorce and thinking about how to divide the property. There is no love here, only calculation and mutual claims. Tristan sat in his chair, staring at the floor. Celeste went into the bedroom, slamming the door loudly. It was just the two of us in the living room, amidst the shards of broken glass and scraps of marital happiness. The silence was hard on my ears, only the ticking of the wall clock and the muffled sobs from the bedroom. Dad, Tristan said without raising his head, how long have you known? I sank down on the couch feeling tired. It had been a hard evening, and there were more difficult conversations ahead. I didn't know for sure. I'd been suspicious for the last 6 months. What exactly made you suspicious? I've been thinking. How do I tell my son that his wife is lying and cheating without looking like a vindictive old man looking for faults in his daughter-in-law? Remember when you came to my birthday party in March? I do. Celeste was wearing a new dress. Expensive. I asked her what the occasion was, and she said it was an old dress she hadn't worn in a while. What's so suspicious about that? There was still a tag on the dress. I saw it when she bent over to pick up her fork. The tag was tucked inside, but the tip was sticking out. Tristan lifted his head and looked at me. The tag? Yes. She lied about the dress being old. Why lie about such a small thing? Maybe she didn't want you to think we were wasting money on nothing. Tristan, that dress cost at least $300. You could tell from the fabric and the cut. That's no small thing for your budget. My son thought about it. I could see other episodes popping up in his mind that had seemed insignificant before. What else did you notice? I stood up and walked to the window. It was already dark outside. The streetlights were on. The windows of the neighboring houses were lit up. People were having dinner, watching TV, putting their children to bed. Ordinary, peaceful life, without dramas and scandals. Do you remember in April when I stopped by while you were at work? Celeste was home alone. I remember you told me about it. I didn't tell you everything. When I came in, Celeste was on the phone. Very quiet, almost a whisper. When she saw me, she ended it quickly. Maybe she was talking to a friend about something personal. Maybe. But then, while we were having tea, the phone rang 3 times. Celeste didn't even look to see who was calling. She just dropped the call. That's weird, Tristan agreed. And when I asked if it was an important call, she said it was an ad man. But it was a regular number, not an ad. How do you know? I saw the phone screen. The number started with a local area code, not 800 like the advertisers. Tristan rubbed his forehead. So you think she got a call from a bank or a micro-lending organization? Most likely. They demanded she pay off her overdue payments. And I was a fool not to notice. You work. You're tired. It's hard to notice little things when your head's full of other problems. I went back to the couch. Tristan looked depressed, but I had to tell him everything. I'd rather let him know the truth now than continue living in deception. One more thing. Back in May, you asked me to take Celeste to the mall while your car was being repaired. Yeah, I remember. We went to the Westfield Mall. Celeste said she wanted to buy a birthday present for your sister. And did she? She did. A $40 scarf. But then we went to 3 other stores. She bought shoes, a bag, makeup. She spent over $400. $400? Tristan frowned. She told me she only spent it on a gift. I thought maybe she had some savings of her own. It's not my place to ask. But when we got to the checkout line at the last store, the card didn't go through. It didn't go through how? The cashier said insufficient funds. Celeste got very embarrassed, asked me to try again. It didn't work. So she pulled out another card. Another? Tristan straightened up. What other card? I don't know. Dark blue. Not like the one you have in common. We only have one credit card, a joint one. And Celeste has a debit card, but it's never a large amount. So she had another credit card. It was in her name. Tristan closed his eyes. How much more I don't know about my own wife. Tristan, maybe we should check her credit history. How do I do that? All right. Check with the credit bureau. As a husband, you have the right to request information about your wife's debts. Do you think there are more debts? I think what we found out today is just the tip of the iceberg. There was a sound from the bedroom as Celeste searched the closet, pulling out drawers. Then the door slammed, and it was quiet. Do you remember the story about her job? I asked. What story? A year ago, she told me she'd been offered a position at a design studio in Cheyenne. Good pay, interesting projects. I remember. She said she'd think about it. And then she turned it down. She said she didn't want to drive to another city every day. Yeah, that's what happened. But I happened to know from Deborah Hampton that there was no job in Cheyenne. What? Deborah works for a staffing agency. She checked through her channels and no one offered Celeste a job in Cheyenne. No one at all. Tristan shook his head slowly. Why would she lie about that? To make herself look in demand. To make you think she could work if she wanted to. And no one actually wanted to hire her? She wasn't even really looking for a job. Celeste's last interview was 2 years ago. She didn't pass. How do you know that? A receptionist at that firm told me. Alice Kramer, we went to high school together. Celeste made a bad impression. Half an hour late, couldn't answer simple questions about design. Tristan stood up and paced the room, picking his way around the shards of glass. So she'd been lying to me this whole time? About the job search? About the offers? That's what it turns out. And I believed it. I thought she just couldn't find the right place. You wanted to believe in her. That's normal. Normal? Tristan stopped and looked at me. Dad, I've been living with a man I don't know at all. You do. Just didn't want to admit what you know. What do you mean? I hesitated for a moment, choosing my words. It's always hard to tell my son the hard truth. Tristan, tell me honestly, were you happy in this marriage? Yeah, I thought I was. Did you or did you? I don't know. For the last year, I felt like something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Has Celeste changed? More demanding. She wasn't happy all the time. The house, the car, vacations. Said we were living worse than all her friends. Did you try to explain to her that your income doesn't allow you to live like millionaires? I tried, but she wouldn't listen. She said I wasn't ambitious, that I should look for a better paying job. And did you? I tried. I even went to Denver for interviews. But the pay's not much higher there, and the housing costs are way more. Did you explain that to Celeste? I did. She said I just didn't want to change my life for the better. I nodded. Typical behavior of someone who lives in a world of illusion. Celeste didn't want to acknowledge reality. She preferred to blame her husband for her lack of ambition. What else did you find alarming? Tristan hesitated. Money. It was always in short supply, even though I make a decent living. Celeste was always asking for one thing or another. How much did she ask for? Little things. $50 for makeup, $100 for a gift for a friend, $200 for a dress. But when you added it up, it was a lot of money. And you gave? I did. I thought if I skimped on my wife, she'd feel left out. And did she feel deprived? Always. No matter what I bought, she couldn't get enough. There were sounds coming from the bedroom again. Celeste was putting things away, rustling bags, probably packing. Tristan, you realize you can't go on like this, right? I do. But what can we do? The debts aren't going anywhere. First we have to find out exactly how much we owe. Then we need to come up with a repayment plan. What if there are more debts than we know? Then we have to make some drastic decisions. What kind of decisions? Sell the house. Move to a cheaper rental apartment. Declare bankruptcy if the debts are critical. Tristan sat back in his chair. 5 years of marriage, and this is the result. Debts and a broken relationship. Not all is lost. You're young, you're healthy, you have a good profession. You can start a new life. And Celeste? Celeste is a grown woman. Let her be responsible for her own actions. We didn't talk for a while. The clock read 11:30 in the evening. Time flew by quickly, but the day seemed endlessly long. Dad, thank you, Tristan said quietly. For what? For telling the truth. I know it hasn't been easy for you. It wasn't easy for me. But it would have been worse to stay silent and watch you be deceived. I never would have known if you hadn't gotten involved. You would have. The truth always comes out. It just happened today instead of 6 months or a year from now. Maybe sooner is better than later. Maybe. The bedroom door opened and Celeste appeared. She had changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair in a ponytail. She was carrying a travel bag. I'm going to my sister's, she said without looking at us. I'm going to stay there for a few days while you decide what to do next. Celeste, Tristan started. Don't say anything. It's all been said. She headed for the exit, but stopped at the door and turned around. Just remember, I'm not the only one to blame for what happened. The door slammed shut, and a few minutes later we heard the sound of a car starting up. Celeste had gone to her sister Violet, who lived across town. The silence in the house became even more oppressive. It was just Tristan and me, and the heavy thoughts of the future. Tristan sat in his chair, staring into the void. The evening had been too eventful, and he needed time to think about it. I understood how he felt when his life was falling apart. It was hard to know what to do next. Sure. Would you like some coffee? I offered. I'd love some. I went into the kitchen and turned on the coffee machine, an expensive model, Italian, costing several $100s, another Celeste expense that Tristan probably didn't know about. I wondered how many more of these surprises he would discover when he started scrutinizing the family expenses. While the coffee was brewing, I looked around the kitchen more closely. New dishes in the cabinet, expensive pots on the stove, an electronic bread maker that, judging by its cleanliness, no one had ever used. The refrigerator was hung with magnets from various countries, France, Italy, Spain. But as far as I knew, Celeste had never traveled abroad. Dad, do you think she's really going to Violet? Tristan asked when I returned with 2 cups of coffee. Where else would she go? She doesn't have anyone else in town. She has friends. Lauren, Emily. She's not going to tell her friends the truth about the debt. It would be embarrassing, but she'd have to tell her sister. Tristan sipped his coffee and grumbled. Bitter. Celeste buys cheap beans, I said, even though a coffee machine costs half your paycheck. Yeah, saving on the little things while spending on the big things. Very logical. We were quiet for a while, sipping our coffee. A car drove by outside the window. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The usual sounds of the evening city, but tonight they seemed especially loud in the empty house. Tristan's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. Celeste, are you going to answer it? I'd have to. He took the call. Yes? What do you mean they wouldn't let you in? Violet said, What? I see. Where are you now? Okay, I'll think about it. Tristan put the phone on the table. Violet wouldn't let her spend the night. Said she didn't want to get involved in the family drama. So where's Celeste now? In her car, in a parking lot at the mall, asking for permission to come home. And what did you tell her? That I'd think about it. I don't know what to do. On the one hand, she's my wife. On the other hand, after everything that's transpired, I put the cup on the table. Tristan, you have to understand, if Celeste comes back tonight, tomorrow it'll be the same old story. She'll apologize, promise to make it up to you, and you'll believe it. And if I don't, then why let her in? So you can have a scandal every day? Tristan rubbed his temples. But she can't sleep in the car, can she? She could go to a motel or some other people she knows. She doesn't have money for a motel. She has credit cards, which are already overloaded with debt. I looked at my son carefully. He was already starting to feel sorry for Celeste, and that's a dangerous tendency. Women like his wife are better at playing on pity than professional actresses. Tristan, tell me honestly, do you want to save your marriage? I don't know. Maybe, if she really changes. Do you believe she will change? He paused, staring into his cup. I want to believe. That doesn't answer my question. No, I don't. Celeste is who she is. She's not going to change just because I want her to. Then why continue a relationship that's doomed? Because divorce is complicated. Property division, alimony. The phone rang again. Celeste again. Tristan, I'm sorry to call so often. I heard her voice as my son put it on speaker. But I really don't have anywhere to go. Celeste, we need to have a serious talk. About our relationship, about our debts. Let's talk. I'm ready to talk about anything. Just not over the phone, but at home. I'm not sure I'm ready to have that conversation today. There was a pause on the phone. Tristan, do you want a divorce? I want to see if there's a future for us. What do you think? After 5 years of marriage? After all the lies that came out today? I didn't lie, I didn't tell you some things. Son, Celeste, you accused my father of stealing in front of strangers. I was upset. I didn't know what to say about the earrings. You could have told the truth and make yourself look like a fool for getting into debt in front of all the guests. Better a fool than a liar. There was another pause. Then Celeste spoke in a different tone, harder and more determined. All right, if you don't want to see me tonight, I'll sleep at the motel. But tomorrow we'll meet and decide everything definitively. It's a deal. And be warned, if you decide to file for divorce, I'll demand alimony. Under the law, a wife is entitled to alimony, especially if she's out of work through her husband's fault. Through her husband's fault? Tristan interjected. You didn't want me to work. You said a man should provide for his family. Celeste, you didn't want to work. Prove it in court. I have witnesses who will testify that you don't want your wife to work. What witnesses? My friends. Lauren remembers you saying that a wife should take care of the house, not her career. I looked at my son. His face had gone pale. Celeste really was willing to lie in court to get child support. I never said that, Tristan said. Yes, you did. I said a lot of other things too, like that you didn't want me to work in another city because it would affect our family life. But those are different things. The court will decide what's different and what's the same, and I'll claim half of the house. According to the law, all property acquired during marriage is divided equally. My father made the down payment on the house, and we paid the mortgage together. The 5-year mortgage is my share too. Tristan closed his eyes. Celeste, let's not threaten each other. They're not threats. They're warnings. You want a divorce, you'll get one. But by the book. She disconnected. Tristan put the phone down and looked at me. Dad, what did she mean about the equity in the house? I mean, you made the down payment. Unfortunately, the law isn't always fair, I said. If the house is registered to both of you, then technically it is considered jointly acquired property. Even if I paid the mortgage alone, even if, Celeste can claim that she managed the household, provided for your life, created the conditions for your work. But she didn't do anything around the house. Who can prove that? Was the cleaning lady an official employee? Were her wages paid with taxes? Of course not. She was paid in cash. So Celeste could say she cleaned by herself. Who's going to refute that? Tristan's in over his head. So she could sue for half the house? She could try. The other question is how much it's really worth. What do you mean? The house is worth $180,000, but there's a $30,000 mortgage on it. The net worth is $50,000. Half of 50 is $25,000. That's not much. Plus Celeste's debts of $10,000. If she gets her debt split in half, you'll owe $5,000 of her spending money. So she'd actually get $20,000 at best, but there's also attorney's fees, appraisals, court costs. It could end up costing more to get a divorce than the property they're splitting. And alimony? Alimony is more serious. If the court finds that Celeste is out of work through no fault of your own, they can award maintenance for 1 year to 3 years. How much? Usually up to 30% of income. In your case, about $1,000 a month. Tristan turned even paler. $1,000 a month for 3 years? That's $36,000? Exactly. That's why a lot of men prefer not to divorce, but just move away. But then I can't officially remarry. You can't. That's the price for making a mistake in choosing a life partner. We didn't talk for a moment. Tristan was obviously considering all the options in his mind and couldn't find any good ones. Dad, what would you do if you were me? I'd go to a good lawyer, preferably tomorrow. A lawyer is expensive, cheaper than a bad divorce. I know a friend of mine, Ralph Thornberry. He's an experienced family lawyer. He can help minimize your losses. Will you talk to him? I'll talk to him. I'll explain the situation, see when we can meet. What if Celeste hires a lawyer too? She will, on your dime, by the way. But it's better to have each side represented professionally than to be sued for years because of inaccuracies in the documents. Tristan got up and went to the window. You know, Dad, this morning I thought I had a normal family. There are problems, but overall it's not bad. Now it turns out I owe $10,000. My wife is a liar and a skeeter, and a divorce will cost me half my property. The problems existed this morning. You just didn't know about them. Better to know the truth now than a year from now when the debts are even greater. You're probably right, but it's still bitter. Bitter, but it's not deadly. You're young, you're healthy, you have a good profession. In a couple years, you'll forget about this nightmare. And if I don't, you will. Time heals. The main thing is not to repeat other people's mistakes. The clock struck midnight. The birthday of the family crisis is officially over, but its effects will linger for a long time. Dad, will you stay the night? Tristan asked. I don't want to be alone right now. Sure, I'll crash on the couch in the living room. Thank you. Thank you for everything. We began to clean up the shards of broken glass, the symbolic remains of a broken family. The morning came gray and rainy. I woke up on the living room couch and heard Tristan fiddling in the kitchen. The clock read 7:45, early for a day off, but neither of us could sleep much after yesterday. My son sat at the table with a cup of coffee and a cell phone in his hands. He didn't look good. Red eyes, unshaven, hair disheveled. He'd clearly had a sleepless night. Good morning, and I said, how'd you sleep? I didn't. I tossed and turned till morning, thinking. Thinking about what? Everything. Celeste, debts, what to do next. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. Rain drizzled outside the window, droplets dripping down the glass. The dreary weather reflected our mood. Celeste called 3 times, first at 6 in the morning, then at 7:30, then an hour ago. What did she want? First, she asked me to come home, promised we'd talk about it calmly. Then she threatened to sue me for abuse if I didn't let her in. Abuse? She says I kicked her out of the house with no money and no ID. She's got papers and credit cards. She does, but she can claim she was afraid for her safety. I shook my head. Celeste was willing to tell any lie to get her way. What did she say the third time? She said she was moving in with Lauren. Violet wouldn't let her in after all, and the motel was expensive. Did Lauren say yes? I guess so. Celeste told her side of the story, of course, that I was a despot and a tyrant and she was the innocent victim. And Lauren believed it. Lauren's her friend. Friends always believe each other. Tristan sipped his coffee and grimaced. The bitterness of last night's drink hadn't gone away. Dad, did you call the lawyer? It's too early to call. Ralph gets up late on weekends. I'll call at 10 no nos. What if he can't make it today? He can. When I explain the situation, he'll know it's urgent. We were quiet, listening to the sound of the rain. The house was quiet and empty after last night's scandals. Even the air seemed different. It was more spacious without Celeste's presence, but also sadder. Do you know what upsets me the most? Ach, Tristan said suddenly. What? Not the debts, not the lies, not even the divorce. It's that I didn't know the man I lived with for 5 years so well. You did. You just didn't want to admit what you knew. What is that supposed to mean? Tristan, tell me honestly, have you ever doubted Celeste? Never once thought she was deceiving you? The son hesitated, twirling the cup in his hands. I have, especially in the last year, but I kept it from him. Why did he keep them away? Because I didn't want to destroy my family because of suspicions. I thought if I worked harder, made more money, Celeste would be happier. And did she? More demanding. The more I gave her, the more she wanted. It's a classic situation with people who don't know how to appreciate what they have. Celeste didn't see her husband's generosity as love, but as a weakness to be taken advantage of. What did your friend say? I asked. About what? About Celeste. About your relationship. Nothing much. Just politely asking how things were going. Have you noticed that they've been inviting you to visit less often? Tristan looked up. Now that you ask, yes, they have, especially Mark and Jennifer. We used to see each other a lot, but for the last year they've been distant. Why do you think that is? I don't know. Maybe they have their own problems. Maybe they didn't like Celeste. Maybe they didn't like Celeste. She was always complaining about their house, how they didn't spend enough on entertainment, said they were boring. And did you tell them that? No, of course not. But Celeste might have told them something herself. I nodded. People can sense falseness and arrogance. Tristan's friends probably figured out Celeste quickly and started avoiding contact with her. The phone rang. Lauren's name popped up on the screen. Hi, it's Celeste's friend, Tristan said. It's weird that she's calling me. He took the call. Hello? Yes, it's me. What happened? How did you take it? Everything? I see, thanks for the warning. Tristan put the phone down with a grim face. Celeste came here while we were gone. Picked up some stuff. What stuff? Lauren said a lot of suitcases and some boxes. Does she have keys to the house? Of course she does. She used to live here. We got up and went to look around the house. The picture was eloquent. All the women's clothes, cosmetics, jewelry were gone from the bedroom. From the bathroom, expensive creams and shampoos. From the living room, several paintings and figurines that Celeste called her own. She even took the coffee machine, Tristan noted in the kitchen. So she's not coming back. Or she wants to take everything of value while she can. We went back into the living room. The house looked different without Celestina's things, simpler but more honest. Gone was the pretentiousness, the ostentatious luxury. Only the necessities remained. In a way, it's better, Tristan said. You don't have to look at things that remind you of your debts. At 10 in the morning, I called Ralph Thornberry. The lawyer agreed to meet Monday morning. Sunday was traditionally spent with his family. I explained the situation to him in general terms, and Ralph said that the case was typical, but would require caution. The main thing is not to make any sudden moves, he warned me. Do not change the locks. Do not hide the property. Do not prevent the wife to take personal belongings. Otherwise, she'll have a case against you in court. We spent the rest of the day putting the house in order and discussing practical matters. Tristan made a list of all known debts, and I helped him request a credit history online. The result was even worse than we expected. Dad, look. Tristan showed me the laptop screen. Another credit card. American Express. $4,200 in debt. What's the total? $14,600. Plus the interest that accrues every day. That's more than 6 months of your salary. More. And the frustrating thing is, I don't even know what that money was used for. There's nothing in the house worth that much. The money was spent on experiences, restaurants, clothes worn a couple times and thrown away, cosmetics that ran out. That kind of spending doesn't leave a trail. In the evening, Celeste called again. This time her voice was different. Not hysterical, but businesslike. Tristan, we need to meet tomorrow and work things out. I've already decided. I'm filing for divorce. Then let's meet with the lawyers. We'll discuss the terms. You already have an attorney? Yes, Victor Crenshaw. He specializes in family law. I knew Crenshaw, an aggressive lawyer who didn't shy away from dirty tricks. Expensive, but effective. Okay, Tristan said. My lawyer will contact yours. And be advised, I'll be seeking maximum compensation. For moral damages, for lost years, for damage to my reputation. What damage to your reputation? You publicly humiliated me yesterday. You accused me of lying and cheating in front of guests. Celeste, you accused my father of stealing. That was an act of passion. You were acting deliberately. She blacked out before I could respond. Did you see that? Tristan said. Now she's the victim, and I'm the aggressor. Typical tactic. The key is not to be provoked. We went to bed late. Tristan asked me to stay one more night. He didn't want to be alone in the house where Celeste had lived. I understood his feelings. Too many memories. Too many unanswered questions. Lying on the couch, I thought about what had happened in those 2 days. The family had fallen apart. The trust between people had broken down. There were long court cases and financial difficulties ahead. It all started with my desire to tell the truth. Was I doing the right thing? Should I have kept quiet, as I had for 5 years? Tristan would continue to live in ignorance. Celeste would continue to spend money. The debts would snowball. But the family was still technically intact. No, I decided. Lies can't be the foundation of a family. Sooner or later, the truth comes out. And the longer it's hidden, the more painful the exposure. It was better to let Tristan find out now, while he was still young and could start a new life. But it was bittersweet to realize that my family would never be the same again. The trust between us was broken forever, not because we didn't love each other, but because we'd seen how easy it was to misjudge a loved one. Outside the window, the rain continued to drip. Somewhere in another part of town, Celeste was plotting revenge and thinking about how to make the most out of the divorce. And Tristan and I were lying in the dark, realizing that life was divided into a before and after that night when the truth was stronger than the lie. Sometimes the truth really does destroy more than lies, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be told.